There are two words that collapsed an entire civilization. Not a weapon, not a war cry, not a threat, just a question. 2 words, 7 letters. What if? Rule 351 of the Galactic Intellectual Safety Protocols. Humans are prohibited from engaging in hypothetical speculation, with species classified as deterministic thinkers. The human cognitive pattern, known as counterfactual reasoning, demonstrates reality destabilizing properties. Human questions beginning with "what if" are considered Class 9 existential hazards. Violations will result in immediate cognitive quarantine and philosophical containment. Let me translate that for you. The galaxy banned humans from wondering, from imagining alternatives, from asking the single most dangerous question a species can ask: what if things were different? Because in 23I61, a human asked that question to the wrong species, and that species' entire understanding of reality shattered in 48 hours. Today, you're going to learn about the hypothetical war, the conflict that was never fought, the disaster that never happened, and the civilization that was destroyed by thinking about possibilities. Because what humans do when we ask "what if" isn't just imagination. It's a weapon that can kill deterministic civilizations. And we don't even know we're pulling the trigger. Let me introduce you to the Korval. Imagine a species that has never been wrong. Not rarely wrong. Not usually right. Never wrong. The Korval are deterministic processors. Their brains, or neural analogs, calculate probability with such precision that they experience reality as a single, inevitable path. When a Korval says, "this will happen," it's not a prediction, it's a statement of fact. They've existed for 12 million years without a single war, because they can calculate the outcome of any conflict with 100% accuracy before it starts. No surprises, no uncertainty, no chaos. They don't have words for maybe, might, or possibly. They have one word, keth, which translates roughly to that which is. Everything is keth, real, certain, determined. Their first contact with humanity went smoothly. They calculated that humans would be cooperative, curious, and ultimately harmless. They were right. They calculated that trade would be mutually beneficial. They were right. They calculated that cultural exchange would proceed without incident. They were. Well, this is where it gets complicated. The human assigned to Korval First Contact was Dr. Amelia Cross, physicist, 32 years old. Brilliant mind, terrible poker player, because she couldn't stop thinking about alternative strategies, even after she'd already made her move. She arrived at the Korval homeworld with one directive: learn everything you can about how they think. And Amelia was fascinated. She spent weeks interviewing Korval philosophers, scientists, historians, and every single one of them described reality the same way, as a singular, calculable, inevitable progression. There are no alternate paths, they told her. Only keth, that which is. And Amelia, being human, asked the question that would destroy their civilization. But what if there were? The Korval philosopher she was interviewing, Kel Threshold, went completely still. I do not understand the question. What if reality wasn't deterministic? What if there were multiple possible outcomes? There are not. But what if there were? Just hypothetically. What is hypothetically? And that's when Amelia realized the Korval don't have hypotheticals. They don't imagine scenarios that aren't real. They don't consider alternatives that didn't happen. They don't ask what if, because in their worldview, what if is meaningless. Things either are or they aren't. There is no in-between, no imagination space, no counterfactual reasoning. Amelia tried to explain. Hypothetically means imagining something that isn't real. Like, what if I'd never come to your planet? What if we'd never met? What if... Kel Threshold's neural patterns began fluctuating erratically. You're describing impossible states, things that did not occur. Why would one process impossibilities? To explore alternatives, to understand different outcomes, to prepare for... There are no alternatives. There is only Keth. That which occurred is that which was always going to occur. But what if you'd made different choices? I did not make choices. I took the only possible action. But you could have chosen differently. No, I could not. The factors that determined my action were themselves determined. There is no could have. Amelia leaned forward. But don't you ever wonder, what if you'd studied something different? What if you'd been born in a different city? What if the universe had started slightly differently? And Kel Threshold said something that Amelia recorded, and that would later be cited in the Emergency Galactic Council session. You're asking me to imagine that Keth could be other than it is. That reality could be unreal. That truth could be false. No, I'm asking you to imagine alternatives. Alternatives to truth are lies. Alternatives to reality are delusions. What you're asking is impossible. But I'm asking it anyway, so clearly it's possible to ask, what if... Kel Threshold made a sound like breaking glass, and their neural patterns collapsed into chaos. Amelia didn't understand what had happened. Kel Threshold had just stopped, frozen, their consciousness locked in some kind of processing loop. She called for medical assistance. The Corval physicians arrived and diagnosed philosophical cascade failure. What did you ask them? The lead physician demanded. I just asked, what if... Do not repeat the question. They cut her off. Your cognitive pattern is destabilizing their deterministic framework. I don't understand. It's just a hypothetical. We do not have hypotheticals. We have reality. You introduced a concept that cannot exist in our worldview, and now Kel Threshold is trying to process impossible states. Within 6 hours, 12 more Corval had been exposed to the what-if question. 3 were trying to calculate outcomes for realities that didn't exist, burning through their neural capacity on impossible computations. 5 were experiencing what humans would call existential dread, the sudden awareness that their entire lives might have been one path among many. 4 had shut down completely, their consciousnesses unable to reconcile determinism with the possibility of alternatives. And 1, a young Corval named 7 of Prime, had started asking questions. 7 found Amelia in her quarters. Teach me, they said. Teach you what? What if? Show me how to think it. Amelia hesitated. I don't think that's a good idea. Your people are... My people are trapped in Keth. We believe we see reality, but we only see the single path we happen to take. You see something more. Teach me. Against her better judgment, Amelia agreed. She started simple. What if you'd chosen to stay home today, instead of coming here? 7 processed this. I did not choose. The factors that led me here were... Stop. Don't calculate. Just imagine. Picture yourself at home right now. What would you be doing? 7 was quiet for a long time. Then, I would be... reviewing probability matrices. The same task I was performing before I came here. Okay. Now imagine you chose to do something else. Something you've never done. What if you decided to go somewhere you've never been? Where would I go? I don't know. Where would you want to go? Want? Yeah. If you could do anything right now, what would it be? 7's neural patterns began fluctuating. There is no could. There is only what is. Pretend there's more. Pretend reality has branches. Which branch would you take? I would go to the crystalline peaks. I have always processed data about them, but calculated that visiting was non-optimal use of time. Why do you want to go there? I don't want... 7 stopped. I have aesthetic response to their geological formations. The light refraction patterns are unnecessary but compelling. That's a want. You want to see something beautiful, even though it's not practical. But I won't go, because it is not optimal. But what if you did go? What if you chose beauty over optimization? Then I would be acting in a way that was not predetermined. I would be choosing? Yes. But that would mean all my other actions were also choices, that I could have done differently, that my entire life is not Keth, but one path among infinite possibilities. Yes. 7 made a sound like shattering crystal. I need to go to the crystalline peaks, now. I need to know if I can make a choice that isn't determined. 7, wait. But they were already gone. Within 24 hours, 7's choice to visit the crystalline peaks had spread through the Corval information network, because it wasn't just a choice. It was proof that choices exist, that the Corval had been wrong about their fundamental understanding of reality for 12 million years. Across their homeworld, Corval started asking, what if? What if I'd studied different probability matrices? What if I'd bonded with a different partner? What if I'd chosen a different city? What if our entire civilization had developed differently? And every question opened new pathways, new possibilities, new uncertainties. The Corval government tried to contain it. They classified "what if" as a dangerous meme. They quarantined affected individuals. They attempted to develop a counter-protocol to restore deterministic thinking. Nothing worked, because once you know that reality could have been different, you can't unknow it. Once you realize your choices are choices and not inevitabilities, you can't go back to believing you're just following a predetermined path. Once you ask, what if? You can't stop asking it. By day 2, their government was paralyzed. Every policy decision became infinite branches. What if we choose this law? What if we choose that law? What if we choose neither? What if we choose both? What if... By day 3, their infrastructure was failing. Engineers couldn't design systems because they kept imagining alternative designs. What if we used different materials? What if we optimized for different outcomes? What if... By day 4, their entire civilization was in freefall, because the Corval had built everything on certainty, on determinism, on the belief that there was one right answer, and they could calculate it. But what if introduced doubt? And doubt is acid to certainty. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. What did you do? They demanded of Amelia. I taught them to imagine. You taught them chaos. The Corval are deterministic processors. Their entire civilization is built on certainty. Without it, they cannot function. Maybe they shouldn't have built their civilization on a lie. It wasn't a lie. It was their truth, their reality. And you destroyed it with a question. Amelia looked at the council, at the representatives from 1,000 species, and said, if your civilization collapses because someone asks, what if? Then maybe it deserved to collapse. The chamber went silent. Because a civilization that can't handle imagination, that can't survive doubt, that can't process alternatives, that's not a civilization. That's a prison made of certainty. And I don't apologize for picking the lock. Here's what happened next. The Corval civilization didn't actually collapse. It transformed. But the transformation was so radical that most of the galaxy classified it as a collapse anyway. Within a month, 47% of Korval had abandoned deterministic thinking entirely. They started making choices, pursuing wants, imagining alternatives. They created art, something they'd never had before, because art requires imagining something that doesn't exist. They developed philosophy, something they'd never needed, because they thought they already understood reality. They started having conflicts, because when there's only one right answer, there's no disagreement. But when there are multiple possible approaches, you have to debate, compromise, choose. The other 53% tried to maintain determinism. They retreated into increasingly complex calculations, trying to prove that everything was still Keth, still inevitable, still certain. But they couldn't, because 7 of Prime had gone to the crystalline peaks, and they'd proven that choices exist. And you can't unprove that. Amelia visited 7 3 months after the hypothetical war began. She found them at the crystalline peaks, standing in the light, watching refraction patterns. "Was it worth it?" Amelia asked. "I don't know," 7 said. "My civilization is divided. Half of us are learning to live with uncertainty. Half are desperately trying to restore certainty. We've lost 12 million years of stability. But you're here, doing something non-optimal." "Yes." "Do you regret learning what if?" 7 turned to face her. Their neural patterns were different now, less organized, more chaotic, but somehow more alive. "Before you taught me what if, my entire life was Keth. Determined, inevitable. I was following the only possible path. And now I'm standing here by choice, watching something beautiful for no practical reason, and tomorrow I might choose something else. And I don't know what I'll choose because it hasn't been determined yet. Is that better? I don't know. But it's mine. My choice. My uncertainty. My possibility. You gave us something terrible. The knowledge that we could have lived differently. That every moment of our 12 million years might have been one path among billions. I'm sorry. Don't be. You also gave us something wonderful. The knowledge that we can still live differently. That our future isn't determined. That we can ask, what if, and then make it real. Even though it's destroying your civilization. Our civilization was already destroyed. It just didn't know it yet. We were living in a beautiful prison and calling it destiny. You didn't destroy us. You freed us. Even though half your species wishes I hadn't. Freedom always looks like destruction to prisoners who loved their cells. The Galactic Council created Rule 351, 6 months after the hypothetical war began. Humans are banned from asking, what if, to deterministic species. Our ability to imagine alternatives is classified as reality destabilizing. Our counterfactual reasoning is a cognitive hazard. The official report stated, human hypothetical thinking introduces chaos into ordered systems. Species evolved for deterministic processing cannot integrate counterfactual reasoning without experiencing existential cascade failures. Translation: humans imagine too much, and it breaks civilizations that depend on certainty. But here's what they found. Humans ask what if approximately 167 times per day. On average. What if I'd taken the other job? What if I'd said yes instead of no? What if I'd been born somewhere else? What if things had gone differently? We're constantly simulating alternative realities, imagining different paths, processing possibilities that didn't happen and never will. The Galactic Council studied this, tried to understand why, and they discovered something fascinating. Humans don't ask what if, because we're unsatisfied with reality. We ask, what if? Because that's how we learn from reality. When something goes wrong, deterministic species calculate what they did wrong and correct it. When something goes wrong, humans imagine what we could have done differently and explore alternatives. When deterministic species face a problem, they calculate the optimal solution. When humans face a problem, we imagine 50 possible solutions and test them against hypothetical scenarios in our minds. What if isn't just imagination. It's our cognitive superpower. It's how we innovate, by imagining things that don't exist yet. It's how we improve, by imagining how things could be better. It's how we survive, by imagining threats that haven't happened yet. It's how we create, by imagining realities that are only possible, not actual. The Corval calculated the optimal path and followed it perfectly for 12 million years. Humans imagine infinite paths and stumble down whichever one looks interesting, learning from every wrong turn. And here's the terrifying part. The Corval never invented anything truly new in 12 million years, because invention requires imagining something that doesn't exist. And they couldn't imagine non-existent things. They could only calculate based on what was already real. But humans, we invented fire by imagining, what if we could create heat? We invented flight by imagining, what if we could move like birds? We invented computers by imagining, what if we could build thinking machines? We invented space travel by imagining, what if we could reach the stars? Every single human achievement started with, what if? Every innovation, every discovery, every advancement, all born from asking about things that didn't exist yet. And the galaxy banned us from teaching that to other species. Because what if doesn't just build civilizations, it destroys them, and then builds new ones from the ruins. But let me tell you what keeps me up at night about this. The question nobody wants to ask. What if the Council was right? The Corval had peace for 12 million years. No wars, no conflicts, no suffering caused by bad decisions. Because they didn't make decisions. They followed the determined path. And it worked. Until humans came along and taught them doubt. Now, they have wars. Small ones, philosophical ones, but conflicts that didn't exist before. Now they have regret. The ability to look back and say, I wish I'd chosen differently. Now they have anxiety. The knowledge that every choice could lead to disaster. Now they have depression. The weight of infinite possibilities and the fear of choosing wrong. We gave them imagination. And imagination includes imagining how things could go wrong. We gave them choice. And choice includes choosing badly and having to live with consequences. We gave them freedom. And freedom includes the freedom to be miserable. Before what if, the Corval had certainty, purpose, direction. After what if, they have doubt, confusion, infinite possibility, and no clear path forward. Is that better? We think so. Because we're humans. We value freedom over certainty, possibility over determination, choice over peace. But what if we're wrong? What if the Corval were happier when they believed everything was determined? What if ignorance of alternatives is actually better than awareness of them? What if is a curse disguised as enlightenment? I don't have an answer. Neither does Amelia Cross. Neither does Seven of Prime. Because once you know that reality could be different, you can't know if it should be different. You just know that you're now responsible for choosing. And that responsibility never goes away. 5 years after the hypothetical war, Amelia Cross was invited back to the Corval homeworld. The civilization had stabilized. Sort of. Half had embraced uncertainty. They were thriving in chaos, creating art, debating philosophy, exploring possibilities. Half had restored determinism. They'd created mathematical frameworks so complex they could pretend they'd calculated their choices all along. Both sides were functional. Neither side was fully happy. 7 of Prime met her at the spaceport. "I need to ask you a question," they said. "Okay. What if you hadn't taught us what if? What if you'd never come here? What if we'd never learned to imagine alternatives?" Amelia was quiet for a long time. "Would you be better off?" she finally asked. "I don't know. That's why I'm asking you." 7, I can't answer that. Because answering requires me to imagine an alternative reality where I made a different choice. And I'd have to compare this reality to that imaginary one. And I'd be biased toward believing my choice was right. So any answer I give is just, what if? 7 finished. Yeah. 7's neural patterns pulsed with something like amusement. "You gave us the ability to ask questions we can never answer with certainty." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Questions without certain answers are the only ones worth asking." 7. If you could go back, if you could choose to never have learned what if, would you? 7 looked at the crystalline peaks in the distance. They'd been visiting every week for 5 years. Always by choice, never by determination. No, because even asking that question requires the what-if thinking you taught me. And I'd rather live with infinite uncertainties than return to perfect certainty. Even though it's harder, especially because it's harder. Easy isn't the same as good. But Amelia, if you could go back, would you teach us differently? And Amelia said something that was later classified and sealed in Galactic Council archives. "Every single day, I ask myself, what if I'd kept my mouth shut? What if I'd never taught you to imagine? What if I'd let you stay certain and peaceful and determined? And I still don't know if I did the right thing. But I know I did the human thing. Which is, I saw something that was wrong, even if it was working, and I couldn't help but imagine how it could be different. That's what humans do. We see reality and immediately ask, what if it was better? And sometimes that destroys everything, and sometimes that creates something new. And you can live with not knowing which this was. No, but I do it anyway, because what if isn't about certainty, it's about possibility. Rule 351 says, humans can't ask what if to deterministic species because it destroys their certainty. But here's what I think. Certainty is comfortable. Determinism is peaceful. Believing you're following the only possible path is easy, but it's also a cage. And humans can't help but ask, what if we could open it? So the next time someone tells you to stop overthinking, to stop imagining alternatives, to stop asking, what if? Remember this. What if built everything you see around you? What if created every innovation you use? What if solved every problem humanity ever faced? What if is why we're here, in space, talking to aliens, exploring possibilities that our ancestors couldn't even imagine. The galaxy thinks what if is dangerous. They're right. But dangerous isn't the same as wrong. And sometimes the most dangerous question is the one we need to ask. What if you shared this video? What if someone needed to hear this today? What if this story made you think about your own choices differently? Leave a comment. What's one what if that changed your life? Subscribe for more stories about why human curiosity terrifies the universe. And remember, reality is what it is. But it could always be different. That's not a curse. That's a superpower.